Make sure this is recording.
Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Bracha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And I have a couple of headlines here as we are approaching this so-called deadline by Donald Trump for a deal to be made, as he says, with the Iranians by 8 p.m. today, or else, according to him, a civilization, right, is going to die tonight. And I say so-called because, we have to ultimately watch and see. But as his tendency has been with these words, and his way of speech to manipulate markets and, the minds of the people, oftentimes he'll say one thing, he won't do it, he might extend the deadline, or, he might do it, another time, right? But keep in mind that even before this whole striking Iran, he himself has come out and said that they deliberately use mixed signals before they go and attack or they go and do something. What's also interesting is, amidst all of this, I believe last night or so, Israel bombed, U.S. bombed Khark Island, and Israel, bombed some railways in Iran. So it's interesting because the so-called deadline, right, is not even here, but they're already unleashing heavy attacks over there in Iran. So we'll see what happens. At the same time, there are sources saying that the Iranians have closed all channels of negotiation, communication, backdoor communication to the U.S. because they're just not seeing eye to eye. So it's interesting that was being said yesterday, I think even earlier today. But now, as it gets closer and closer to the time, there's mention of things like this here, right? U.S. official cites glimmer of progress on ceasefire after Trump warns a whole civilization will die tonight. And of course, it's interesting that it would come from U.S. officials because usually you hear one thing from the West, you hear one thing from the East, and then so on and so forth. So we'll see, right, what ends up happening. Does he end up hitting the button? Is he going to extend the deadline? Now, his tone has been the strikes on Iran are happening, quote unquote, but could change. Okay. So anyway, let's read a little bit here. It says here, Trump threatens to take out entire country of Iran tomorrow night, which that's not going to be the case in the sense that Russia and the allies of Iran are not going to sit there and allow you to take out the entire country. Okay, that's not going to happen. They're going to intervene. Okay, so in fact, there is a headline I have here on Russia and China, basically being against the use of military force by these other nations to open the strait. So tomorrow night demands free traffic of oil in Hormuz. Trump threatens Iran can be taken out in one night, maybe tomorrow. Warns every bridge and power plant will be destroyed. Washington Street Journal. That's a big claim. Every bridge and power plant. Washington or WSJ reports U.S. military is making preparations for potential strikes on energy targets in Iran. Universities and airports are already being hit, which is crazy work, right? Sunday night, Axios report on a U.S. proposed 45-day ceasefire has by Monday morning been rejected by Iran, which later on Monday issued a 10-point letter via Pakistan. And they're basically saying, we don't want a ceasefire, we want an end to this war, right? With guarantees that you're not going to attack us again and you're not going to trigger this again, which the U.S. seems to not be on board with, right? So that gives you insight that they don't want an end to this. Israel strikes large petrochemical plant at South Pars, which is responsible for half of the country's petrochemical production. Now you see how much damage they're doing here, right? Do you think that the Iranians in their minds are thinking that if you're doing this already right now, then we negotiate a so-called peace deal with you, and then you turn around and bomb us again? Like, what's going to stop you from doing that? Trump reaffirms Tuesday deadline before vital infrastructure gets attacked as final, calls Americans opposed to Iran war foolish, saying it's all about Tehran not getting a nuke. Israel kills experienced longtime head of IRGC intelligence. Iranian missile strike on Haifa residential complex kills 4. Now earlier there was a post that the White House was denying, right? They basically were saying that there were some claims about the potential use of a nuke by the U.S., which they were saying was being hinted at by, I think, J.D. Vance, but they came out and said that's not the case. But what I want to highlight here is the fact that that's even being mentioned or talked about at all. Right? It's a very interesting thing there. So next we have your U.S. official cites glimmer of progress on ceasefire after Trump warns a whole civilization will die tonight. Now, when you start hearing speech like this, you're not dealing with, you're dealing with a madman, right? And he's been put in office, and he has his handlers, right? He has his guardrails, but this is the face that they need to push something like this. Okay, a whole civilization will die tonight. You're basically, you're not just saying I'm going to commit a war crime. You're saying like I'm going above and beyond. And he said that. He said that like there's nothing that aside from his own moral compass that's going to stop him from doing whatever he wants. Tehran Times: all communications with U.S. aid or U.S. side suspended. Then issues correction, reverses. This after Trump Tuesday morning threats a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. Axios cites glimmer of progress on negotiations. Well, we'll find out when 8 p.m. hits, right? If he doesn't come out before Trump, that is, and say something, then we'll find out when 8 p.m. hits. In a call with Fox's Brett Bayer, Trump says 8 p.m. deadline today could change if negotiations move forward, but sticking to deadline for now. And I'd be very curious to hear if so-called negotiation is made, what exactly this negotiation would be. You know, which side is going to capitulate? Which side is going to give in to the other? And how's that going to go? But just know if they did come out with something like that, that's not going to be anything substantial, right? And all that means is that the next time this fire lights again, it's going to burn hotter than hot. Kharg Island heavily bombed in preparation for potential U.S. Marine Special Forces ground seizure. So you got to think about that, right? Like, remember what they did in Venezuela, right? There was a loud explosions, and then boom, the forces went in. And when they were speaking about the operation after the fact, they were saying, like, this is all strategic, right? We took out this, we took out that, we took out their surveillance, we took out their eyes so that we can go in there. So look at what they're doing. Where are they bombing? Why are you saying that, okay, we're close to reaching a deal or we're trying to reach a deal, but you're strategically hitting certain parts in Iran? Okay? You already bombed Kharg Island, and now they're saying what? In preparation for potential U.S. Marine Special Force ground seizure. So all of these, you know, it's just, there's deadline here, deadline here. It's not really for peace, it's for time. And they showed you that before. It's time and time again. Anyway, reports of human chains at bridges, power plants in Iran forming. Yeah, because then if you actually go forward with it and blow those places up, I mean, that's going to be a lot of blood on your hands, and it's not going to be a good look. Israel has begun attacking Iran's railway infrastructure, telling civilians to not take trains, cancellations across country. IRGC, still defiant, announces new retaliatory attacks on petrochemical plants in eastern Saudi Arabia. And at the end of all of this, what is going up? Oil. Because in the side effects of this conflict is the fact that the world is still suffering. Okay, Iran's 10-point counter to the U.S. 15-point ceasefire shows sign of willingness to compromise. Reparations from U.S. dropped as a demand. Vance says war will end very shortly. And Russia, China veto UNSC Hormuz resolution, which I have on here. Okay, and it lets you know that, well, at least what side they're on, or, you know, where their interest lies. Let's say that. So taking a quick look here, Russia, China veto UN resolution authorizing military force to reopen Hormuz Strait. And this is basically, well, I'll read the first two paragraphs, you get a sense of it. On Tuesday, a United Nations Security Council resolution on opening the Strait of Hormuz failed due to Russia and China vetoing it. And that's today. It was drafted by Bahrain and authorized countries to use military force, if necessary, to open the strait for the free flow of shipping and commerce. The resolution garnered 11 votes in favor, but permanent veto-wielding members China and Russia blocked it by registering no votes. So they're letting you know, no, this is not a good idea. We're not on board with this. Now here it says, it appears that China and Russia expressed concerns about the invocation of Chapter 8 or 7, arguing that such authorization could be interpreted as legitimizing the use of force by member states without clearly defined limits. They also raise concerns because it's in their best interest that Iran is preserved. Okay? They're making money, at least Russia is, right now. They also raise concerns about the potential imposition of sanctions and maintain that the draft failed to address the root cause or causes of the current crisis in the Middle East. In their view, the text risked exacerbating tensions, which is to make it worse, rather than promoting de-escalation. And they urge Bahrain not to advance the initiative. These reservations led China and Russia to break silence twice. So they're basically saying, no, don't do it. We against this. Okay, we're not for this. And we know, right, as pertaining to Ezekiel 38, that Russia is going to get involved. Okay, and it mentions that they're going to have an evil thought and say we're going to go up to the land of unwalled villages. So right now they're still playing that semi-diplomatic role, but you'll see once the line of no return or the point of no return is crossed, at that point all bets are off. So taking a look here, today is Bridge Day. It says, as traders return from the Easter break, markets are again counting down to an ultimatum deadline set by President Trump. Trump took to Truth Social over the weekend to warn the Iranian regime to make a deal. threatening that Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day, where infrastructure of that kind will be targeted by American forces if Iran does not open the Strait of Hormuz. Now, once again, Iran is that the strait being closed is something they're staunchly on, and the U.S. is like, no, it has to be open. So even if they come to some deal, and it doesn't involve the opening of the strait, which I don't see Iran doing that, they're going to tell you their mission is not done. And some way, somehow, the conflict is going to continue to escalate because it's the will of the Lord. Trump has set a deadline of 8 p.m. for a deal to be reached. Iran has said that it will retaliate against energy and water infrastructure of Gulf states if it is struck. So there's a lot going on, but at the end of the day, just like the Lord said, pursuant to Mark 13 and 37, and what I say unto you, I say unto all, watch. Okay, so we have to watch as well as pray, because as these things, escalate more and more, they're going to reach this front, this so-called home front. Okay, as they're even talking about having unused tools, that they can use if needed. So keep your eyes open, keep your eyes and ears on the news, pay attention, and let's see how the Lord, steers this ship of prophecy. So with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying and informative to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachak Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.
And obviously there's updates since that video went out, but nonetheless, though, it's where we were yesterday, and still where we are. I mean, the energy crises are here. France's fuel shortages exposed Europe's new energy crisis. 3 years after reducing its dependence on Russian gas, Europe is still heavily dependent on imported oil on strategic routes. The supplier may have changed, the dependence has not. So like everything else, 12% of French petrol stations have run out of at least one type of fuel, better known as the petrol fuel. Insists there is no nationwide shortage and no supply crisis. Officials describe the problem as a series of local and temporary logistical tensions concentrated mainly in the network of Total Energy service stations. But the figure matters because of what it reveals. Europe's new energy crisis, triggered by the war against Iran and rising tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, is no longer an abstract geopolitical risk. It is the beginning to affect ordinary lives. Shortages are concentrated above all in the stations operated by Total Energies, France's largest energy company. Under political pressure to help consumers, the company imposed a temporary price cap of $1.99 per liter for petrol and $2.09 for diesel until April 7. Well, that was yesterday. These prices are significantly below the French average. As a result, drivers rushed to the Total Energy stations in unusual large numbers. Hundreds of stations began running out of fuel, according to French authorities. Around 700 of the 900 affected petrol stations belong to Total Energies. So that's pretty bad. Okay, so you see that everything's already affected. And yeah, this bombing of Karg Island shows you the potential threat, because, like the brother said, when you hit certain areas and all that, usually indicates that you're taking out this, you're taking out that, so that way you can do a ground operation. U.S. military on Tuesday began bombing Iran's Karg Island, which is located deep inside the Persian Gulf, and potential target for U.S. ground operations if the U.S. continues to escalate the war. Well, they will escalate. You already know what the scriptures say. So we're watching to see. The Most High shall say, is in, what the news will tell us, and linking it up to scriptures. In recent weeks, President Trump has positioned thousands of additional troops to the region, including Marines, U.S. Army airborne soldiers, which could be used for attack on Karg or other islands. Any operations to seize such islands would likely result in significant U.S. casualties, as the U.S. terrorists would face steady Iranian drone and missile attacks, which have taken out entire bases. So even if you did get a brigade there, you ain't going to be able to stay there and hold foot for very long. And so, like everything else, though, it's been a fiscal train wreck in the U.S. It's destroyed the economy, as this professor goes into.
Well, let's discuss this now live with the economics and politics professor at St. Mary's College of California, Jack Rasmus. Jack, good to have you on the program with us. The U.S. is spending a reported $1 billion a day in the war on Iran, not to mention the hundreds of millions lost on damaged or destroyed equipment. Do you believe those estimates are accurate? And if so, is this ultimately sustainable, and for how long?
Well, I actually think it's more than $1 billion a day. It's closer to $2 billion a day, at least. And that means, 36 days we've spent over $70 billion. And we're going to go at least 2 to 4 more weeks at the minimum here with this war. So we will have spent over $100 billion easily on this, quote, war. That's not counting, what we spent on Venezuela and the naval blockade on Venezuela. That costs a lot of money. That's why Hegseth is asking for $200 billion. That's to cover Venezuela and Iran. It's called Overseas Contingency Operations. That's for direct military activity. That's in addition to the regular budget for the Pentagon, which is 900 and some billion. And the Department of Defense is even more than the Pentagon. We're spending last year $1.1 trillion on defense. Now we're adding $200 billion. Now Trump is asking for $400 billion more. Well, that's about 1.6, but that's not the whole picture for U.S. defense spending, you see, because we have additional spending that goes on for Veterans Affairs, for past wars, the CIA and intelligence operations, that's over $100 billion. Nuclear weapon development, that's separate. Military alliances is separate. I can go down the line, and as of last year, we were spending $2.1 trillion. That's all government figures, by the way. You can look it all up. Now we're spending $200 billion more for contingency operations and $400 billion more. That's like $2.7 trillion. That's over 40% of everything that's spent in the United States. And it's adding to the budget deficit, which this year will be over $2 trillion. It's been close to $2 trillion in the past 2 or 3 years. Now it's going over $2 trillion, way over. And the question is, how do you pay for that budget deficit? Well, you got to sell a hell of a lot of treasuries. But wait a minute, people aren't buying as much treasuries. Foreign holders of treasuries are dumping their treasuries. We're heading for a fiscal train wreck in the U.S. And Trump has no idea about the economic consequences of what he's doing. I really think he's quite dumb about this. And his advisors are
You mean retarded?
They don't know what they're really doing to the U.S. and global economy. And we're going to see some terrible repercussions here in the fallout of all this.
It really all sounds very dire, the way that you're putting it there. Jackie, the U.S. military industrial giants like Lockheed Martin, RTX, and Boeing have actually seen their valuations drop in March, and they've yet to recover. Well, what's going on here? I mean, traditionally in America, we see prolonged conflicts actually increase these companies' stocks.
Yes, well, it's a short-term conflict so far, and the general stock markets, for a whole variety of other economic reasons, are shaky. We got bubbles going in artificial intelligence, and the bubble burst in crypto. We have products in the private credit sector here. It looks very shaky. In the repo markets, that's kind of economics arcane references, but nonetheless, if you look at it, we have a lot of volatility in the financial markets. That's beyond just what's going on with the war. And I think that's what's being reflected here. And if we have a deeper recession as a result of all this, you're going to see the financial markets really have a hard time down the road.
I want to go back to some of those mind-boggling numbers you were throwing out a few minutes ago. The White House is planning to request $1.5 trillion for the Department of War's budget next year. That's an unprecedented increase. The Pentagon has failed every single audit for the past 8 years. How do you explain this decision?
Yeah, well, they can't account for any of the spending for over a decade now, maybe more. But once again, the $1.5 trillion that you're referring to is just the Pentagon spending. That's not the Department of Defense spending, and that's not the CIA and Veterans Affairs and nuclear in the Energy Department and the black budget that they don't put in the budget. You never see that. That's tens of billions of dollars a year.
Yep.
Interest on the debt. Because
everything is showing you what's happening.
Defense spending. As I say, we're looking at 2.5, 2.7.
Economic crash is next, and then they usher it in.
2027 as a result of all this going on. And we're only halfway through the current fiscal year. Who knows what's going to happen between now and October 1st?
Jack, we've already seen oil prices rocket past $100 per barrel. What happens if Tehran refuses Trump's ultimatum to reopen the Strait of Hormuz today?
Well, obviously Iran's going to reply in kind, and we're going to see even a more intense air war going on. I don't think we're going to see, a naval landings and so forth. I'm pretty sure that the U.S. military is saying, no, you can't really succeed in that kind of a World War II-like landing, So it's going to be an air war, and it's going to be devastating because, Iran is just going to shower down its missiles on, refineries and other infrastructure, and even economic infrastructure elsewhere, through the Gulf states and in Israel. It's going to intensify, and that's going to drive the cost of oil up, the global price of oil up. It's like 110, 120. I think by the end of the week we could be looking at 150 easy. Gasoline prices in the United States, they're talking about, well, it's up $1 a gallon. Well, that's on an average looking at the lowest cost gasoline. When you look at the big cities and you look at premium gasoline that most people drive, you're looking at $6 a gallon. You're looking at $2 a gallon already. And I've seen talk in California that if the price of global oil goes up to $150 a barrel, we're going to be paying $10 a gallon for gasoline here in the U.S. Now, that's mostly price increasing, right? And if people have to pay more for prices, which isn't the real economy, that means they're going to spend less on other things, commensurately, that does affect the real economy. You're going to see consumer price spending, which is 2/3 of the economy, really take a hit if gasoline goes up to, $10, $7, $8 a gallon on average here, which I think is quite possible. Trump thinks this is going to be over. He thinks that one of the worst things that happened was it was so easy for the U.S. to pull off a regime change in Venezuela. I think that gave them overconfidence that they could do the same thing in a couple of weeks with Iran, but it's a total different animal dealing with Iran than it was dealing with Venezuela. But I think it's one of the reasons why we're in this trouble that we're in. We got interest rates in the U.S. that were supposed to be going down, and we're going down. Now they're not going to go down. Now they may probably go up before the end of the year. That will slow the real economy even more. So you got all these forces of inflation and at the same time economic slowdown going combined. And, if this war goes on and he does what he wants to do, it may be the economic straw that breaks the camel's back, I think.
So there it is right there. And that's what they want. Totally to bring in a digital dollar. To end the petrodollar and bring in the new stable coin, as they call it, because over here they don't call it CBDC. Trump likes to use different language, but it's really a CBDC at the end of the day. Iran trapped U.S. terrorists during attempt to infiltrate key nuclear site in Isfahan. Under the guise of, we're trying to search for rescue pilot. Well, they were trying to actually go in. They actually did try to pull this off and failed to do so. Iranian Foreign Ministry said this week the alleged U.S. rescue mission in Iran could have been an attempt to steal enriched uranium, which it's looking very much so like that. Because you don't sit in C-130s, which can land a lot of troops, but also try to bring in military machinery, such as tanks, etc. Well, that all got shot down anyways. U.S. attempt to infiltrate one of Iran's key nuclear sites at Isfahan was thwarted due to a trap laid by Iranian forces, according to information cited exclusively on Press TV. Press TV obtained information about recent U.S.-Israeli operation in Isfahan, which revealed the failure of the operation. According to the evidence, this failed operation has nothing to do with the so-called rescue mission. And, well, we'll just play this clip.
Press TV has obtained information about the recent U.S.-Israeli operation in Isfahan. The information reveals the enemy's failure in the operation. According to evidence, the failed operation has nothing to do with the so-called rescue operation for an American airman. Evidence shows that the enemies wanted to infiltrate into nuclear facilities in Isfahan. The obtained information discloses Washington's miscalculations about the capabilities of Iran's air defense systems in the face of the enemy's aircraft. Some evidence suggests that the dismissed U.S. generals had warned the country's army about the risk of such an operation. But U.S. War Secretary Pete Hegseth insisted on carrying out the operation. Multiple aircraft had been dispatched while Iran's armed forces were waiting for them. Following the failed operation, Trump hurriedly held pressers to put a lid on his failure and to portray the mission as a rescue operation. But even Americans do not believe the Hollywood-style lies. The failure of the Operation Isfahan can be even worse than the U.S. Army defeat in the Tabas operation in 1980. Ample evidence has emerged regarding the recent operation by the American Zionist enemy in Isfahan, revealing a major strategic failure for the United States. The recent frantic threats from Trump are a result of his severe defeat in the recent Isfahan operation. The failed Isfahan operation followed extensive aerial reconnaissance missions conducted by the enemy in the preceding days. During these prior infiltration and reconnaissance missions before the Isfahan operation, the U.S. and possibly the Zionist regime lost a significant number of aircraft, including at least one A-10 plane and two Black Hawk helicopters. The 0 hour for the failed Isfahan operation was determined in a confidential meeting at the White House under the direct supervision of the U.S. president. It has now been clarified that this operation had no connection to the claimed mission to rescue a downed fighter pilot. Based on prior reconnaissance, a deserted airfield near one of Isfahan's nuclear facilities was selected as the landing site for the C-130 aircraft. Evidence suggests that the mission intended to infiltrate and to attack one of Isfahan's nuclear facilities. The Americans' miscalculation was their belief that Iran's air defense would be unable to counter the aircraft involved in this operation. Well, some indications suggest that U.S. generals who had been removed from their positions had issued serious warnings to the Secretary of War about the high risk of such an operation. However, due to Haig's lack of military knowledge and Trump's insistence on proceeding, the generals were removed just days before the Isfahan operation. But multiple aircraft were deployed for this operation, while Iranian armed forces were fully alert and waiting for their arrival. In reality, the U.S. Special Forces fell into a trap.
Can't blame them on the funeral, the former generals.
The Army, police, Revolutionary Guard, and local police forces initially did not respond strongly when the first C-130 carrying dozens of Special Forces commandos landed. Evidence shows that this aircraft deviated slightly from the runway when landing at the deserted dirt airfield. Minutes later, a second C-130 carrying necessary equipment, including specialized vehicles and several MH-6 Little Bird helicopters and other support gear, approached the abandoned airfield. At that moment, the prepared Iranian forces targeted the second aircraft before it could land, forcing an emergency landing. Two Black Hawk helicopters also arrived after the second C-130 had landed. At this point, the aircraft, helicopters, and commandos disembarking from the first aircraft became prime targets for the Iranian armed forces. Once the U.S. Special Forces realized they had fallen into a trap, the White House Situation Room immediately decided to change the mission from infiltrating the nuclear site to rescuing the dozens of U.S. commandos under fire. The Americans quickly sent several smaller aircraft to evacuate their commandos and managed to extract them with great difficulty. This rescue operation, hastily conducted due to the entrapment of the forces, was so rushed that some soldiers and officers abandoned their equipment to save their lives. Evidence of this includes reconnaissance documents from one of the abandoned American officers. After evacuating the U.S. commandos, American fighter jets created a 5-kilometer fire perimeter to prevent Iranian forces from approaching the abandoned C-130s. They also carried out heavy bombing of their own equipment to prevent it from falling into Iranian hands. In this failed operation, U.S. Special Forces did not even have the opportunity to launch the Little Bird helicopters, some of which were destroyed on the ground or even inside of the second C-130. Following this humiliating and heavy defeat, Trump hastily and chaotically held multiple press conferences to cover up the failure and to portray it as a pilot rescue mission. Trump's publicity stunts, along with his ill-informed Secretary of War, who in a Hollywood-style manner lied about this failed operation, have not even been accepted by many Americans. It is expected that Trump will continue to fabricate Hollywood-style operations to create false achievements for public opinion. However, his repeated storytelling and lies, along with those of his Secretary of War, which have lowered public trust in him, is at an all-time low and have made him Goebbels-style claim barely believable. American and global public opinion is questioning how a country supposedly left without air defenses, an army, our armed forces could manage to destroy such a number of fighter jets, diverse aircraft, helicopters, and drones, and continues to catalog these destroyed assets. Well, the heavy defeat of the Isfahan operation could be recorded as the worst and most humiliating failure of the U.S. military, even surpassing the failed Tabas operation of 1980, 1359 on the Iranian calendar. It is expected that the heavy aftershocks of Trump's major fiasco will affect not only the course of the war, but also the political future of this reckless and ignorant U.S. president, his party, and the American political landscape for years to come. Well, this has been a statement, of course, the information that was given to Press TV, and we're going to take a look at exactly what it all could mean. Thank you so much.
So there you have it. The true accounts on what actually took place in its entirety. So like everything else, though, this is just right before, well, I'll read that, but Iran warns a more devastating response as U.S.-Israeli strikes kill more than 34. Tehran vowed escalation if Trump goes ahead with his threat of hitting civilian infrastructure ahead of apparent deadline on Tuesday. So like everything else, though, of course, hitting Cargill and a few other things. More than 34 people were killed by U.S. and Israeli strikes across Iran from Sunday to Monday, as Tehran warned of a more devastating response to the attacks on civilian areas. If attacks on civilian targets are repeated, the next phases of our offensive and retaliatory operations will be more destructive and more widespread. So, like everything else, though, there's this. The warning follows U.S. President Trump's threat on Sunday to strike bridges and power plants if Iran does not open the fucking Strait of Hormuz by the extended deadline on Tuesday. So, like everything else, though, he ramped up his threats. And like everything else, though, it's a humiliating defeat. Why the U.S. allies are suffering more than its enemies. Europe and Asia are bearing the brunt of the ongoing conflict as global oil and gas supplies are plunged into turmoil. So they're just completely being wiped out economically. In war, economic consequences often follow a logic distinct from military objectives to unprovoked and illegal U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran. Among several objectives raised by the two aggressors, goals incidentally that have constantly shifted, the desire to weaken Tehran has appeared among the more pressing. But the conflict's most severe economic repercussions have instead fallen mainly on DC's European and Asian allies. Due to the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, all the region's centrality to global energy and commodities supplies, the war has triggered an asymmetric shock. Europe and Asia are now bearing the brunt of energy scarcity, inflationary pressures, and redirected global trade. So like everything else, just totally defeat on everything. So, again, his threats that he would just totally wipe out their civilization.
Shalom. Welcome to another video. And as always, before I get started, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Heavenly Father and His only begotten Son, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Rachodash. And next level honors to the head apostles / other bishops of the great millstone who teach and who rule well. Peace, blessings, and safety to all you sincere Akim. Keep pushing, keep believing, and keep the faith, regardless of what people hear or whether they forbear. So this is going to be a news and prophecy update. Okay, President Donald Trump has been making threats to Iran. Okay, of course, the April 1st post that he made about how they better open up the Strait of Hormuz, or he would pretty much bring them into hell. And then now, I believe this was yesterday. All right, today is the 7th, so this was yesterday, Monday, April 6th, the day after Easter. He said, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will." This is a threat he made to Iran. So, once again, okay, this is a news and prophecy update. All right, as I stated, I did a yesterday. Me and the brother Nah did a fishing for the elect, and we said there's no turning back from here. Okay, this is it. All right, this is it. The war is escalating. There's no sign of things going back to so-called normal. All right, and it's only going to get worse from here. Okay, so that being said, we're here to give you warning of these things to come, and of course to tell you to repent, because this is all judgment from Heavenly Father. He's the one that is causing these things to come to pass. All right. So with that being said, that's the topic I'm going to dive into in this video. And how righteous I mean Heavenly Father's will. It's edifying to the elect. I'm going to start off in this news article that I got pulled up from CNBC, because I wanted to see and make sure that this quote that I had up on the screen was credible, and it's correct. It's on a bunch of different mainstream news media outlets. So here you can see this article is entitled, "Trump warns Iran's whole civilization will die tonight unless deal is struck." All right. Key points: President Donald Trump sharply ramped up his threats against Iran, warning a whole civilization will die tonight unless a deal is struck. Trump has angrily demanded that Tehran reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The latest threat came after U.S. forces overnight struck military targets on Karg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal. A White House official confirmed to CNBC. So yeah, this was actually, looks like this was posted Tuesday morning today. President Donald Trump on Tuesday sharply ramped up his threats against Iran, warning a whole civilization will die tonight unless the country's leadership strikes a deal that includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz. It says the threat came after U.S. forces overnight struck military targets on Karg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal. A White House official confirmed to CNBC. All right, I'm not going to keep reading into the article, but once again, brace for impact. Okay, repent if you haven't repented already. Okay, learn those names of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai, because those names are the true names to call on for salvation. That's prophesied of in Zephaniah 3:9, that he will reveal unto us a pure language before he brings the judgment, that we may all call upon him and serve him with one consent. All right, so this is the time that we're coming into. It's only going to escalate further from here, and Esau's pride has brought him to this point. Okay, let's go ahead and get some precepts on that. So we'll start off in the book of Obadiah. All right, there's a trap that is being set for Esau. Okay, that's Salakia. Okay, Obadiah, there's only one chapter entitled "Edom Will Be Humble." All right, you see how proud Esau is. Okay, Esau, Edom being the so-called white man, particularly those who rule over the society. All right, they're 144,000% Edomites. Okay, but it says, the vision of Obadiah, thus saith Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and the ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye and let us rise up against her in battle. Okay, and Iran didn't even attack the United States. The United States attacked Iran first on behalf of the Israelis, but now what we're seeing is the nations are getting ready to all join together against Babylon the Great. This prophecy being fulfilled. Let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. For the pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? And though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, right, that's the insignia, the emblem for all the different European nations for the most part, the European powerhouses, power structure. The Roman Empire used the eagle, and of course America, Babylon the Great, used the eagle as well. Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, from thence will I bring thee down, saith Yahweh. And that's what we're getting ready to see. Okay, this is the downfall of America and the downfall of Esau, Edom. All right, it's all playing out because all the nations are getting ready to rise up against him. Now let's go to Isaiah the 10th chapter. And this chapter talks about Esau, Edom as well. But in this chapter, it uses the prophetic code word of the Assyrian, all right, which represents oppressors. So Esau, Edom, okay, he is the common oppressor. And we'll read this in NLT. And Yahweh tells you what he's going to do. And this chapter shows the mindset of Esau, okay? So this is Isaiah 10:5 in NLT. It's entitled Judgment Against Assyria, which, once again, Assyria represents oppressors. Okay, so it says, what sorrow awaits Assyria, the rod of my anger. I use it as a club to express my anger. And I'm sending Assyria against a godless nation, against the people with whom I am angry. Assyria will plunder them, trampling them like dirt beneath its feet. Okay, and that's what happened with us. The godless nation, the ones who was angry against, were the children of Israel. Okay, and we were taken captivity under the ancient Assyrians. Okay, the northern kingdom was, and then in today's time under these modern day Assyrians, all right, which are the Edomites, they're the modern day oppressor. It says, but the king of Assyria will not understand that he is my tool. His mind does not work that way. His plan is simply to destroy, to cut down nation after nation, and that's how he sees Iran. These Edomites see Iran as just another, country they're going to conquer, destroy, drop a bunch of bombs on, and then, get them to submit. All right, but really they have been they've been caught in the trap. The Heavenly Father, all right, has pretty much raised up the nations to fight against them, and their violence is going to come down upon themselves. So the same trap that they've set is going to fall back upon them. All right, it says, he will say, each of my princes will soon be a king. We destroyed Calno just as we did Carchemish. It says, Hamath fell before us as Arpad did, and we destroyed Samaria just as we did Damascus.
yes, we have finished off many a kingdom whose gods were greater than those in Jerusalem and Samaria. So we will defeat Jerusalem and her gods, just as we destroyed Samaria with hers. After Yahweh has used the king of Assyria to accomplish his purpose on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, he would turn against the king of Assyria and punish him, for he is proud and arrogant. All right, so he used them to punish us. Okay, and now he's getting ready to use the nations to punish them. All right, and then the nail in the coffin is going to be the men of Yahweh shall being raised up with spiritual power to judge the mount of Esau, as it says in the last verse of Obadiah. Okay, so he used them for a period of time and gave them impunity on the earth to destroy nation after nation, and now he's getting ready to flip the script on them, and they're going to get a taste of their own medicine. Verse 13, this is the mindset of Esau here. Okay, it says, he boasts, by my own powerful arm have I done this. With my own shrewd wisdom, I planned it. I have broken down the defenses of nations and carried off their treasures. I have knocked down their kings like a bull. I have robbed their nest of riches and gathered up kingdoms as a farmer gathers eggs. No one can even flap a wing against me or utter a peep of protest. And that's how they've always thought. Okay, that's how they've always thought. They've always thought that no one could fight against them. The scriptures tell you that, Revelation 13. Okay, who can make war with the beast? All right. It says, but can the axe boast greater power than the person who uses it? Is the saw greater than the person who saws? Can a rod strike unless a hand moves it? Can a wooden cane walk by itself? Therefore, Yahweh of heaven's armies will send a plague among Assyria's proud troops, and a flaming fire will consume its glory. And that's what's going to happen via those ICBM nuclear missiles. All right. It says, Yahweh, the light of Israel, will be a fire, the Holy One of flame, and he will be a flame, and he will devour the thrones and briars of fire, burning up the enemy in a single night. And this is how you know, once again, that's talking about this modern day Edomite kingdom, because the same judgment of being burnt up by fire and destroyed in one night is prophesied of in many different chapters pertaining to Esau as well. Isaiah 47, the daughter of Babylon, Revelation 18, okay, Babylon the Great. All right, they all, Jeremiah 50, okay, they all talk about the same judgment, all right, being destroyed in one night by fire. Okay, so that's all it's going to take, Heavenly Father. And really, 1 hour, as the scripture says in Revelation 18th chapter. But this is the mindset of Esau, because the Most High has given him impunity and power, the blessing of the sword, okay, to take peace from the earth. But now he's getting ready to reverse that. Let's go to Habakkuk chapter 2. Okay, Habakkuk chapter 2. And this is how Iran feels and all the other nations. Okay, Habakkuk 2, and I'm going to start at verse 4. Behold, his soul which lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. We read in Isaiah 10 that he has devoured and gathered the nations like a farmer gathers his eggs, something like that. Okay, and NLT tells you, wealth is treacherous, and the arrogant are never at rest. They open their mouths as wide as the grave, and like death they are never satisfied. So his greed, these are the characteristics of the wicked. It says, in their greed they have gathered up many nations and swallowed many peoples. All right, continuing on in verse 6. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe unto him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay, which one of that word for thick clay is going into debt. All right, that's another characteristic of Esau. Okay, is that he's got himself in a very heavy debt. The national debt of America is rising millions of dollars daily. This war is costing millions of dollars daily. All right, now we read this in NLT, Habakkuk 2 and 6. But soon their captives will taunt them. They will mock them, saying, what sorrow awaits you thieves? And now you will get what you deserve. You become rich by extortion. How much longer can this go on? Let's read this in the NIV. It says, will not all of them taunt him with ridicule and scorn, saying, woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion? How long must this go on? And what have we've been seeing Iran and China, both Iran and China have been mocking, the United States and mocking Trump through these different AI videos that they're putting out on the internet. Okay, so this is these prophecies being fulfilled. Continuing on to verse 7. Shall not they rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them? Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land and of the city, of all that dwell therein. And Iran did a video, AI video, where they were shooting missiles at America, okay, at the Lady Liberty, Statue of Liberty. And in the video, they had all these different nations around the world, people from, Palestinians, okay, to Iranians, to Native Americans, Black Americans, so-called, all these different people around the world that the West has destroyed. And when they shot the missile, it had written on it, vengeance for all, okay? So they're pretty much, fulfilling this prophecy here. They're taunting the wicked, taunting Esau, right, and saying the whole world is going to rise up against you because of all your violence that you committed throughout the four corners of the earth. And like I said, they've been allowed to do that because we read in Isaiah 10. All right, the Most High gave them the power and has pretty much given them impunity for a period of time. But after their purpose is done, which their whole purpose was solely to discipline the children of Israel for our disobedience, that has been accomplished. And now the remnant is being raised up, so the Most High is getting ready to take their power from them and give them a taste of their own medicine. Okay, so that's what we're seeing here. So Trump is really setting himself in a trap, because that old, Edomite strategy, just come in and kill everybody and take what you want, that's not going to work anymore. All right, that time is coming to an end. Okay, and he's not going to get away this time. Matter of fact, let's go to Micah chapter 2, and we'll close it out here. All right, and it's entitled "Woe to Oppressors," which that's what the West is. Okay, the United States of America and the Israelis. Okay, these societies were built off of oppression. All right, they said rape, rob, murder. Okay, and that is just not going to work anymore. Okay, the world is going to end up rising against you, and that's what we're seeing happening. And you doubling down on it is only going to make it that much more brutal when the judgment comes. This is Micah 2:1. Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand. And why is it in the power of their hand? Because according to Job 9:24, the earth was given into the hand of the wicked. So they were given the power to do these things. Like we read, they're just the club of the Heavenly Father to express His anger. Okay, like we read in Isaiah 10th chapter. That's all that they are. All right, but once their purpose is accomplished, which it's been accomplished already, the affliction of Zion, all right, now He's getting ready to reverse it. It says, and they covet fields, meaning the desire that does not belong to them, lands, and take them by violence, and houses, and take them away. So that's their MO. Okay, that's their modus operandus. That's their default mode of thinking. Like I said, go in and take what you want by violence. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage. But here's the point in verse 3. Therefore, thus saith Yahweh, behold, against this family, the family of the oppressors, the Edomites, do I devise an evil, for which ye shall not remove your necks. Neither shall ye go haughtily, for this time is evil. So they're not going to be able to get that noose of judgment from around their necks. The Most High is about to give them the death penalty, and He's been putting that noose around their neck, and they're not going to get out of it. Okay? They've gotten away with thousands of years, going all the way back to the time of the Greeks, just coming in by taking things by force and slaughtering everybody because that was the Heavenly Father's blessing that He gave to them, the blessing of the sword. But all the way back to their forefather, Esau. Right? But now, that's coming to an end. Okay? You're not going to escape this time. So, like I said, this is a news and prophecy update. Okay, telling you what's going to happen. And of course, in the midst of this judgment, it's going to be great death and destruction. So that's the reason why we tell you to repent. Because even though this judgment is really for Esau and the nation, 2/3 of our people are going to receive that punishment as well because they're joined unto him. All right. So once again, repent, turn away from this world.
The fatness of Jacob shall wax lean. That's what that's talking about.
All right. And Yahweh wretches out. We all be delivered. Okay. Those of us are the hopeful elect. But that's it. I'm going to go ahead and close it out. Just wanted to share this article with you guys. That being said, all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rachadash. And until next time, Shalom, Wa Abad the Ball.
Yeah. And if I didn't say it, Shalom, first and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rachadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teaching this truth and sincerity. And a shout out to the Akims out there in the four corners of the earth proclaiming this truth. Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Hashem Rakakadash, Brakatum. So if I said it earlier, then at least I know I got it covered because I'm not sure I said it earlier, right? But I got to keep that. But here's what's happened since yesterday. Okay, all that was, the threat looming, etc. But here we go. Trump walks back threat to destroy entire Iranian civilization. Tehran claimed it achieved great victory and forced DC to accept its 10-point plan. See, Iran already drew up one. U.S. President Trump suspended his looming attack against Iran's energy infrastructure, announcing a 2-week ceasefire to negotiate long-term peace agreement based on a workable 10-point proposal from Tehran. And when they shall say peace and safety, then come the sudden destruction. So all that backs off, which we thought that, okay, to usher in all the other things, it would have to back off a little bit. Then World War III just picks up right from there. So, nonetheless, though, you see how the war got started. And you see how all the players haven't all come in, but they were close to coming in. So we know how the war got started and who started it. Just hours after warning that a whole civilization would die tonight, Iran refused to open the Strait of Hormuz. Trump reversed course following a direct appeal from Pakistani negotiators. Based on conversations with the Prime Minister and Field Marshal of Pakistan, wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran, and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agreed to suspend the bombing and attack against Iran for a period of 2 weeks, Trump posted on his social media platform. So, like everything else, though, well, we know who really won the war, and it ain't the U.S., but he's going to posture like he had won, that Iran's no longer a threat, blah, blah, blah. You can already see what those headlines would be. Trump declares 2-week ceasefire with Iran. President Trump declared on posted Truth Social that on Tuesday, the U.S. was going to stop bombing Iran for a period of 2 weeks as part of a mutual ceasefire deal. Trump said it was subject to Iran agreeing to open the Strait of Hormuz, and it was initially unclear if Tehran had agreed. But Iran Foreign Minister Agashi said in a statement that if the U.S. and Israeli states stopped attacking Iran, Tehran would cease their defensive operation for a period of 2 weeks. Safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz would be possible via coordinating with Iran's armed forces. So, pretty much, though, they kind of backed down from that because Iran had the upper hand all along. U.S. and Iran, Israeli state agreed to the 2-week ceasefire. Tehran will allow safe passage via Hormuz for 2 weeks. President Trump agrees 2-week ceasefire with Iran, conditional on them agreeing to complete immediate and safe opening the Strait of Hormuz. Iran accepted Pakistan's 2-week ceasefire proposal. With the deal approved by the new supreme leader, Iran also says safe passage via Hormuz possible for 2 weeks. Israeli state reportedly agreed to suspend bombing while talks are ongoing. So, that's that part of it, but there's more. You know, and of course, Trump announces the Iran war is effectively over, so he's kind of curved the language, because he told everybody that the war would be over in a couple of weeks, so he's trying to make it look like that. Just like we are experiencing in the U.S., this could be the golden age of the Middle East. This is coming from InfoWars. A big day for world peace. Iran wants it to happen. They've had enough. Likewise, so has everyone else. The United States will be helping with the traffic buildup in the Strait of Hormuz. There will be lots of positive action. Big money made. Big money, motherfucker. Sounds like Insane Clown Posse. I want my money, motherfucker. And that's how he's treated Iran all along. Corporate bullying. As if Iran was a corporation. Yeah, they have lots of corporations, but pretty much so that's how he's treated this whole thing. And what it is they've been failed, and like everything else, though, this corporate bullying shit didn't really work that well. It's him that's retreating because, simply put, they've been running out of shit. And they've run out of ways to try to penetrate Iran. Iran can start the reconstruction process. We'll be loaded up with supplies, all kinds, and just hanging around. Remember how Apostle Tahar said that they'll be stationed there, but they ain't moving. Hanging around in order to make sure that everything goes well. See, Apostle Tahar kind of gave you a clue that that's kind of what they would do, that they would just be sitting ducks, waiting there. I feel confident that it will. Just like we are experiencing in the U.S., this could be the golden age of the Middle East, President Trump. Holy shit, man. Talk about, there's bullshit and then there's Trump shit, right? So like everything else, though. But this is where it was before, as he goes into a little bit.
Unless you're Rip Van Winkle or been hiding under a rock for 100 years. That Trump's extremely erratic. But he's extended the deadline on Iran in the last 3 weeks 4 times. So it wasn't hard to predict that he would probably extend it again. Past behavior is the most indicative of future behavior. In psychology, criminology, you name it. And so this morning, the Wall Street Journal reported that, we're seeing some good signs. He may extend it again. So Polymarket and everybody else is betting that he will extend his total destruction, annihilation of their civilization, quote, And so I believe that coming up at 8 p.m. tonight, he will not strike Iran. But that's kind of an oxymoron because he's been threatening to blow up their bridges and their power plants. He's already been doing some of that in the last few days. Power plants, the biggest bridge in Iran. And Israel and the U.S. began bombing Kharg Island this morning, about 7 a.m. Eastern, and attacking bridges and railways all over Iran. So that's what's so confusing about all the policy. So confusing. Oh, we're victorious. Oh, they've given up. Oh, we've won. Oh, we don't want the strait. Keep it closed. Big deal. Open the effing strait. That's the craziness of all this. And it's beyond a negotiation tactic. Trump got lured into this war. Trump got manipulated. Trump got lied to.
At least the flock draw them out.
And we know that. We know Netanyahu told him to be a 4-day war. That's confirmed. And so we've been set up in this. This is COVID 2.0, a way to kill the recovery. And it's basically probably done that already. Exploding energy prices, 1/3 of the fertilizer not getting through. This will be felt for at least a year. Even if it stopped now, it's a question of whether other recovery is going to work. So I'm praying there isn't an attack. They don't intensify tonight, because how else can they intensify? They've already hit them with basically everything they got. They've hit 16,000 targets. But the Iranians are dug in, and the Iranians are in a war of attrition, and they control Strait of Hormuz. But Trump admitted 3 days ago they keep closed. Before he said it didn't matter, they got BB guns. And yesterday he did a press conference and said, oh my God, they've got a really formidable military. And that is the reality. When it comes to the ground, and when it comes to actually putting troops in there, and that's what that really was a few days ago, was an attempt to get uranium with the C-130s and all that. And,
see, even he knows that.
So turned into a rescue mission. They changed the subject. So this is a disaster. Trump's being advised by Mark Levin that couldn't find his ass with both hands. Netanyahu doesn't care what happens to America, he just cares about Israel. And so that's totally disgusting. So if I had to make an approximation, I would say that these massive intensified strikes don't happen tonight at 8 p.m. and Trump extends the deadline a couple days or a week. But it doesn't matter because they're already doing the strikes. They're just not the total destruction, because you can't do that without nukes. So it's just lies within lies, within half-truths, within BS, within confusion. So that's the facts.
Yeah,
what's
better known as Trump shit.
I think he'll say they've extended the deadline, but they really didn't, and they're hitting their civilian infrastructure. Will he hit their water, a war crime? Saying it'll wipe out an entire culture and civilization that'll never come back? It's the definition of genocide. I didn't sign on for this. I didn't vote for this. And the vast majority of Americans agree with me, and this is just totally disgusting. Trump has taken his administration, all the work it was doing, and just burning it all down. This is Trump committing political suicide, or as they say in Japan, seppuku.
He's right. So that's how Alex Jones lost all confidence in Trump. It's just by what he just said there, And pretty much, though, even Tucker Carlson made similar statements. Russia ferries 175 Russian nuclear scientists out of Iran via land border with Armenia. Russia announced that it has successfully evacuated a main group of Russian workers from Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant, which had been hit several times by U.S.-Israeli terror strikes throughout the over 1 month long war. A group of 175 Russian employees of Rostom Atomic Energy Corporation were evacuated via land route through northern Iran, being taken a flight out of the Armenian capital of Yerevan, American capital, right, to Moscow. And Armenia is where pretty much the majority of the original Syrians are, by the way. Moscow requested that the U.S. impose ceasefire for the site while the Russian staff were evacuated. So there's that as well. Iran has declared historical victory over U.S. Says enemies forced to accept its proposal. Right, because, the ones dictating the terms, it ain't America. It's been Iran dictating the terms. Iran declared historic and crushing defeat of the U.S. In other words, they chased them off. And talks about that in Isaiah chapter 17, towards the end of the chapter, that they would be chased off. Iran declares historic and crushing defeat of the U.S. and the Israeli regime after 40 days of war. announcing that D.C. has been forced to accept a 10-point Iranian proposal that includes permanent ceasefire, lifting of all sanctions, and the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region. So, there's that. According to the statement, the U.S. agreed to a 10-point proposal that fundamentally commits Washington to. So, I believe that they have their fingers crossed, because they're saying 2 weeks, but Iran's saying that this is part of a bigger plan. So, I definitely don't see, when they say peace and security, then comes sudden destruction, that we're closer to that, more than anything else. No new aggression against Iran. Continued Iranian control over Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of enrichment, removal of all primary sanctions, removal of all secondary sanctions, termination of all UN Security Council resolution, termination of all Board of Governors resolutions, payment of compensation to Iran. I knew that had to be included, because they need reparations. They need compensation for everything that they've done. The U.S. and the Israeli state will never meet these conditions, and the war will just go on anyways. Withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region. Well, they're already stationing a whole bunch in Saudi Arabia and all those areas. So, cessation of war on all fronts, including against the heroic Islamic resistance of Lebanon. So they have to stop, but the Israeli state, and I'm going to read that in a minute, but they have to withdraw from Iran, from Lebanon as well. Iran has achieved a great victory and forced criminal America to accept its own 10-point proposal, statement read. Ultimate surrender. Pakistani media says Trump backed down to Iran after 40 days. Pakistani networks described Donald Trump's announcement of a 2-week suspension in the American attacks against Iran as the president's ultimate surrender to the Islamic Republic. Iran, on its part, declared a historic and crushing defeat of the U.S. and Israeli regime after 40 days of war. And they did stand up to a bully, which I just read that. But King Bibi, well, he's already not even meeting part of that 10-point ceasefire. King Bibi says Lebanon excluded from ceasefire. Well, they're going to do what they want anyways, these fucking goddamn gutter rats, right? Israeli Prime Minister King Bibi said on Wednesday the Israeli state supports U.S. President Trump's decision to suspend attacks against Iran for 2 weeks, adding that the ceasefire does not include Lebanon. King Bibi said Israeli state backs pauses strikes on condition that Iran reopens key maritime straits and halts attacks. So, like everything else, though, it says it doesn't include Lebanon. So they're continuing their war against Lebanon. Israeli state continues its terrorist attacks against Lebanon despite the ceasefire. Iran and U.S. set for further talks as Israeli terrorists warn Lebanese residents to evacuate. Italy rules out Hormuz naval deployment without UN mandate. Iranian media reports 95% of U.S. assets in region completely damaged or destroyed. Iran says U.S. forced to accept its framework for talks. Those are all the updates, which I read all of them. So that's about where we're at. I got one more here before I close this out, And it's for Professor Marandi, which he's very highly intelligent, and he's coming from Iran. If anything's happened, definitely the U.S. credibility amongst the citizens has definitely changed, and, well, they definitely know who's in the right and who's in the wrong, and they know that their government has lied to them time and time again, and that Iran was right. That's about where they're at. So you're seeing that, indeed, a change is happening, and just right before all that, you got economic woes worldwide. Well, that's going to cause. I'll bring out Isaiah 17 now that I think about that, because again, it's looking like they were chased off, right? You know, because, and this is a future prophecy not too distant, which probably just happened. And here it goes. You know, this is talking about Babylon and its terrorists, right, in the region of the Persian Gulf. Isaiah chapter 17, verse 12. Woe to the multitude of many people who make a noise like the roar of the seas, and to the rushing of nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations will rush like the rushing of many waters, but Yahweh shall rebuke them, and they will flee far away, and be chased like the chaff of the mountains before the wind, like a rolling thing before the whirlwind, which is talking about the nuclear destruction. So before the nuclear destruction, they would be chased off. And that's exactly what's happened. Iran has taken their stand, and the nations have backed off, you know, that multitude of many people. So this Russian nation's multitude of many people is talking about that great city Babylon. You know, that's what it looks like to me as I read it. Then behold, at evening time trouble, and before the morning he is no more. And that's talking about Babylon the Great being completely taken out. This is a portion of those who plunder us, and the lot of those who rob us. It's got to be talking about Babylon the Great there, because we know that ultimately Babylon the Great will be destroyed by nuclear war. And whirlwind is a clear example of that. When you see that in the scriptures, it's talking about the nuclear war. So before the whirlwind, they shall flee far away and be chased like the chaff of the mountains before the wind. You know, so this is definitely prior to the nuclear war, but the nuclear war will happen. You know, it's just a matter of time. But there's a few things that have to take place before it goes fully nuclear. Like everything else, though, Trump is a bully that they keep chasing off, but he will start World War III along with King Bibi, which it's going to be the Most High that provokes him to do this. See, the Most High is the one that musters up Pharaoh, you know, and you know who modern day Pharaoh is, Nero 47. He's the one mustering the Lord of hosts to the battle, right? Which is ultimately his judgment on all nations. So we're seeing it in real time. Got one more here before I close this out. Then I want to say Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rekakadash, Wal Abal Babal. Brakatum Jehovah. Now this next video is just basically about the false narrative, which the information war, well, you already know that Babylon the Great has lost that. But Professor Mondi explains how, the so-called uprisings and all that was happening in Iran, how this has totally been, dismantled. That these were nothing more than Mossad CIA operations to try to cause strife in Iran and have the opposite effect. The people of Iran stood together and stood by their government and leadership just before the Ayatollah was assassinated on day one of World War III. So hopefully this has been edifying. Bracha the Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rekakadash, Wal Abal Babal. Brakatum Jehovah Shalom.
Crossing live to University of Tehran, Professor Saeed Mohammad Maradi joining us here live on RT International. Mr. Maradi, you are doing non-stop interviews for the past month plus. We're very grateful for your time today, and welcome to the program here on RT.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here on the program today. Just before I really start getting into the big details in Iran, I want to get your reaction first to apparently Donald Trump saying that he sent, quote, a lot of arms to Iranian protesters. I'm trying to understand if this is referring to the very violent riots in January with countless external actors involved, because if that's the case, you and I spoke in January, Professor, and you even told me you had suspicions of this already being in play. Your comments?
Absolutely. It's just an admission of what we already knew. And the Western media, which was lying at that time, saying that these were peaceful protesters and the Iranian government officials or police or government forces were just gunning down protesters, that was all a lie in order to create an environment to justify this murderous war of aggression. And in this war, they've been bombing protesters. They've been bombing people on the streets who've been protesting against the U.S. aggression and against the Zionist regime's aggression. A 15-minute walk from here, there was an airstrike on one of those gatherings of people, and a woman was murdered just 5-6 nights ago. Yeah. Yet you don't see this in Western media. But this admission is key because the Israeli regime has already admitted it, but it just shows that these violent rioters, and 3,117 were killed, all the other numbers are fake. But whatever the real number, the fact is that the West did it. They are guilty. when Trump says he sent in weapons, that means they know who exists in Iran to receive those weapons.
Right.
That means those networks were already in place and they were active on the ground at the behest of the West. So this is not just an admission that they sent weapons to murder people, but it's an admission that they have that network, and it was that network that was murdering police officers, burning ambulances, burning clinics, and also it just shows these Kurdish terrorist groups in northern Iraq, what role they play alongside the United States in murdering Iranians.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about these external actors involved. I mean, I know you and me both spoke about this in January. The New Year celebration, Mike Pompeo, he said, wishing a new year to all the Mossad agents walking beside the Iranians. It's like, well, there we go, admission. You've got these guys who are working there, receiving the weapons and exacerbating the crisis. Let me ask you, if I may, let's bring it up to today, Professor, if I may. The countdown is once again on Trump promising hell for Iran if it doesn't open the Hormuz Strait. What are your expectations? Because Iran continues to remain quite defiant as it's waiting for a reasonable, long-term peaceful resolution.
Absolutely, and this shows that Trump is not winning, is he? If he was winning, he wouldn't be using such abusive language and such, and threatening to carry out crimes against humanity openly. And he's been doing it repeatedly. This war was supposed to end in a couple of days, and it failed. And then they said Iran is running out of missiles and drones, and we see that Iran is hitting them hard day after day after day. And it's really the United States that's lost this war, as well as the Zionist regime. And Kent and Joe Kent's resignation letter reveals everything. He was a Trump appointee, a high-ranking intelligence officer, said, look, this war is about Zionism. It's about the Israeli regime. They imposed it on the United States. There was no attempt by Iran to threaten the United States. There was no move by Iran to produce nuclear weapons. This is all about Zionism. So the misery that Trump and Netanyahu are imposing on the world and the economic crisis is thanks to Zionism, the Israeli regime, Netanyahu, and Trump. But the fact is that Iran is not going to accept any ceasefire that doesn't meet Iran's key demands.
Yeah.
Because we already had a ceasefire 9 months ago. And then what did they do? They just regrouped, rearmed, and attacked us again with greater force.
Yeah.
So the Iranians are going to make sure that peace is created in an environment where people can live in security. After all, last night, they bombed another one of our universities in Tehran.
Yeah.
These criminals know no boundaries.
Yeah.
And remember, the United States was pretending that they were doing this to free the Iranian people. They've been bombing university after university, hospital after hospital, school after school, ambulance after ambulance, infrastructure, petrochemical plants, gas plants, gas infrastructure. This is not to free the Iranian people. This is to destroy the Iranian people.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong comment, and absolutely right, Professor. Just to be absolutely frank, I mean, you talk about Trump and his expletive-laden rants. I mean, a lot of people are saying he's cracking under pressure. He's screaming and shouting here, and yet it's worth noting, truths come quietly, but lies come loudly. I wanted to get your opinion, if I may, on the so-called rescue operation of this American crew member of the F-15 fighter jet. Vast wreckage of planes, the C-130, helicopters, but they were downed apparently not in the area.
And you already heard that from
close to the
Press
Isfahan
TV, what
nuclear
really
plant.
happened.
Your thoughts of the entire operation, please.
Well, before I respond to that, very briefly, I just want to point out that when Trump says he's going to send Iran back to the Stone Age, did you see any media outlet in the United States and in Europe become outraged? Did you see The Guardian or the New York Times say that he's threatening to carry out a Holocaust against the Iranian people?
Nope.
No, because the political elites in the West, the media, they're all morally bankrupt. They're all criminal. They're all evil. If they had any honor, any dignity, any humanity, they would have expressed outrage. Even those who hate Trump, they won't speak out against this. They'll just speak out against Trump and say that he's destroyed the U.S. economy or he's made a catastrophic. Call him out for threatening to carry out the greatest Holocaust in human history. But with regards to this so-called rescue attempt, after all, the Western media and the United States will always say that this was a heroic operation and a victorious move, but it was a failure. The fact that they lost 2 planes, very expensive planes, and they had to destroy them, the fact that they lost helicopters, it's clear that this was no success. And I think it's quite clear that this was more than just some rescue operation. We don't have any footage of the pilots or what happened, but those planes were not in that area. And I think that they were actually probably trying to do something else, but they failed.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, why would you send in a C-130, big, heavy transport craft to pick up one single guy? They sent in this huge transport craft, a whole bunch of choppers too. Yeah, 2 of them, right? So clearly, Professor, they were up to something else. A lot of analysts, Professor, that I've seen, they actually describe what happened as an Iranian ambush The Iranians for years have hypothesized how will the American Israelis come at us. And they knew that the American forces were going to come through this mountainous region to get to this specific area. And the Iranians reportedly set up mobile launchers, mobile radars, and performed an ambush, which absolutely shocked the Pentagon and the White House. Meantime, Professor, there are reports that Washington and Tehran are perhaps indirectly speaking about a potential short-term, long-term ceasefire. Do you know anything about this? Can you help me out?
Well, first, I just want to add that the United States will, in anything that happens, whether it's this sort of operation or anything, they'll always claim victory. But then the truth gradually comes out. And in this particular case, I think it's quite clear that the Iranians were well prepared. And this is probably the reason why so many generals were purged. They were purged right before this because they knew that this was going to, the whole project of assaulting Iran was a very bad idea, and I think this is good evidence of this. With regards to talks, there are no direct talks between Iran and the United States. There's no doubt about that. That's 100% for certain. There are messages always going back and forth, and there have been messages going back and forth for years. Some of them have gone through Russia in the past, some have gone through Oman. So this is nothing new. The Americans are giving messages. So far, Iran has not received any message that meets its core demands. Until Iran's core demands are met, there's not going to be a halt in hostility. So the United States is going to have to change its tone. Iran is willing to go down the road of mutual destruction. I've been saying this for years. I've been saying this on RT for years. They should have known this. The Americans professed shock. Trump professed shock at the beginning of the war that Iran would strike back at U.S. targets and assets in the Persian Gulf region and those complicit regimes that allowed them to carry out this assault. They should have known. But if the United States goes for taking Iran back to the Stone Age, I assure you, Iran will take them back to the Stone Age as well.
Yeah, strong comment right there, Professor. Listen, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. There's a video going around out there, I'm not sure, but I think it was released by the IRGC. It shows Mojtaba Khamenei going into an operation situation room. It looks like it's very deep underground, some kind of high-tech bunker, but it shows him walking into the operation room, and on the big screen, you see Israel's Dimona nuclear facility right there on the big screen. Can you give me any insight on that, your comments?
Well, obviously, I don't know any details about operational issues, but the fact is that Iran's capabilities are still hidden. Everything that we've seen till now has been a miscalculation. The Americans and Israelis were saying Iran has this certain number of missiles. We're continuing to hit them every day. It's obvious that they had no assessment about our missiles, no assessment about our drones, no assessment about our production, or our air defense capabilities, or our air force capabilities, or our naval capabilities that are all underground in tunnels alongside the coast of the Persian Gulf and Sea of Oman. They have miscalculated big time. And Iran's most developed technologies have yet to be used, and Iran's allies in Yemen, in Iraq, and elsewhere, they have yet to make their final move. Right now, Iran is prepared to go up the escalation ladder, but we didn't start this war, and we do not want escalation. But every time the Zionist regime escalates, Iran will escalate further, and Iran has already shown this. It's clear to everyone on this planet that the Israeli regime doesn't care about the global economy. It's willing to sacrifice Indians, Brazilians, South Africans, everyone for their selfish ethno-supremacist regime, but Iran will not let them have the upper hand.
Professor, I've only got about 45 seconds left, but I just wanted to ask you, on a personal level, you're there in Tehran, you've been doing these interviews constantly for well over a month particularly. I just wanted to ask you, how are you there? How is your day-to-day life there? How are you faring?
Well, since they've made direct threats against me, and they put a bounty on my head, I have isolated myself from my family. So I isolate myself from everyone.
I think we've just lost the signal there with Professor Saeed Mohammed Moradi. What an absolute shame. He was just telling us exactly how he's faring, not just professionally, but on a personal level, being in the capital city of Tehran, daily bombing campaigns by the Israelis and the Americans. We understand there are some supply chain breaks, and we were just getting down to what it's like for a civilian with day-to-day life in Tehran. We will get back to the professor when we can. For the meantime, thank you for joining us for this live broadcast from Moscow. We are back in half an hour.